On a usual Sunday afternoon, Jake invited me to his place to assist him with his computer. After days of his complaints about the screen refusing to turn on, I decided to break from my usual weekend routine and pay him a visit. The journey was brief, roughly 20 minutes from my home, yet it unfolded through a serene suburban landscape that seemed straight out of a film. Streets lined with trees. Homes are positioned at a comfortable distance, allowing for a sense of openness, with the gentle aroma of freshly mown grass wafting through the atmosphere. The stillness enveloped me, a silence that felt almost unsettling. Upon my arrival, the door was opened by Jake's mother, Monica. She welcomed me with her usual smile. Monica had a knack for looking effortlessly polished, even in her most relaxed attire. That kind of natural allure you would anticipate from someone who effortlessly draws attention without any struggle. She exuded a warm, inviting energy, and I always valued the way she regarded me not merely as her son's friend, but as a genuine individual. Jake dashed out to pick up some snacks. She remarked, stepping aside to allow me entry. He'll return shortly. If you'd prefer, you can stay inside. I acknowledged with a nod and entered the space. The aroma in the air was a delightful blend of coffee and a hint of sweetness, perhaps cinnamon. The aroma enveloped you in a sense of belonging, despite the fact that you were far from home. She guided me into the living room, and I placed my bag on the couch. The location was quite pleasant. Warm, tidy, just the right size, spacious without feeling overcrowded. Jake was the sort of child who likely overlooked the small nuances, yet his mother appeared to place great importance on them. We engaged in light conversation for a few minutes. She inquired about how things were at work, whether I was managing to get enough rest, and similar concerns. Everything seems quite typical. Her politeness was unwavering, yet the manner in which she posed those questions conveyed a sincere concern that was hard to ignore. Her intentions went beyond mere friendliness. It felt as though she genuinely cared about my well-being. She poured me a cup of tea, and I accepted. We settled at the kitchen island, our mugs in hand, engaging in light conversation about various topics. Melodies, the atmosphere, anything really. She mentioned that the house seemed much more serene now that Jake had taken on a full-time job. It felt as though everything around us had transformed, she remarked with a soft chuckle, yet there was an undertone in her voice that rendered it more of a declaration than mere humor. That was the moment she spoke those words. It's interesting, but you evoke memories of a person from my past. At first, it nearly slipped past me unnoticed. I glanced upward, uncertain if I had truly understood her correctly. Could you clarify what you mean? I inquired, feeling somewhat perplexed. Was she referring to one of her friends? Honestly, I can't recall her ever talking about someone in that way before. She offered a faint smile, one that felt different from the familiar warmth I had come to expect. It possessed an intriguing quality that set it apart. A touch more reminiscent, perhaps. My ex-husband, she remarked, almost nonchalantly, as if it were merely another detail she was divulging. Back when we were just starting to date, I suppose. You somewhat evoke memories of him. Prior to the shift, I found myself uncertain about how to react to that. I chuckled softly, aiming to maintain a relaxed vibe. Let's focus on the highlights, shall we? She let out a soft laugh, yet her gaze lingered on me a bit more than I anticipated. Indeed, she remarked, her voice becoming gentler. The serene vibe. The manner in which you absorb words before sharing your own. He was once like that as well. Prior to the transformation of his existence. However, you see, that's just how life treats individuals. A peculiar tightness gripped my chest. It wasn't a painful sensation, yet it stirred a sense of unease. I was at a loss for how to interpret it. I attempted to dismiss it, yet her words resonated within me. There was an unexpected fragility in her that I hadn't noticed before. Just as I was about to speak, the door let out a haunting creak as it opened. Hey, I've got the snacks. Jake's voice resonated throughout the house. Monica sprang to her feet, as if jolted back into the present moment. She straightened her sweater, tidied her hair, and faced the door. "He's back," she remarked, her voice brightening to its familiar cheerful cadence. I nodded, attempting to mask the strange sensation that began to take root in my stomach. The remainder of the visit unfolded as expected. Jake and I repaired the computer, munched on some chips, and enjoyed a selection of random videos on YouTube. Yet, amidst our laughter and the familiar banter, Monica's remark lingered in my thoughts, resonating like a persistent echo. What had prompted her to say that? What was its significance? What made it seem like something deeper than a mere fleeting thought? As I departed, an odd feeling of bewilderment lingered, refusing to dissipate. Perhaps it was insignificant. Perhaps I was simply overanalyzing the situation. Yet, there was an intensity in her gaze, a weight to her words, that suggested a significance beyond mere casual conversation. I attempted to bury it deep within my thoughts. Yet, as I made my way home, it persisted, hovering like a specter. I was unable to escape. The following days seemed to unfold like any other. Yet, that dialogue with Monica lingered in the recesses of my thoughts. It wasn't merely the content of her words, but the manner in which they were delivered. She was drawing a significant parallel. It carried a certain gravity, as if I evoked memories of someone significant from her history. A person who may have held significant importance to her at some time. Yet, she had swiftly dismissed it, leaving me uncertain if I was merely overanalyzing or if there was something deeper lurking beneath the surface. Jake and I hardly discussed it. We spent time together as we always did. However, I observed a change in Monica the next time our paths crossed. Initially, it was understated. The manner in which she welcomed me at the door felt a touch more inviting than normal. Her determination to sustain the dialogue was evident. Initially, I attributed it to her usual friendliness. Yet, as time passed, a shift began to stir within me. It felt as though she was perceiving me from an entirely new perspective. That Friday, I found myself at Jake's place once more, ready to assist him with some urgent homework tasks. His preoccupation with work had lingered for several days, and it was unmistakable. As I entered, I found Monica busy in the kitchen. She glanced up from the counter and offered me a smile, just as she always had. Yet, this time, her smile held a deeper meaning. A gaze that lingers, filled with unexpressed words. "Hey, Jake's upstairs," she said, her tone airy, yet there was an underlying sharpness to it. "Would you like something to drink before we begin?" I gave a slight nod. "Water would be wonderful." She rose to fetch the glass. As she spoke, she inquired, "How has your week been? Is there anything thrilling happening?" I nearly chuckled at the inquiry, recognizing how ordinary it seemed. "No, not quite. Merely the standard fare. Well, you know, it's all about balancing work and school." She rested against the counter, and I found myself captivated by the way her eyes held on to me. Her smile remained, yet there was an unmistakable shift in the way she gazed at me. Not overtly flirtatious, yet there was undeniably a strange energy lingering in the atmosphere. She wasn't attempting to be alluring. It felt as though she was intrigued, as if there was something about me that had ignited an unexpected fascination. As she passed me the glass of water, our fingers grazed briefly, a fleeting connection in that moment. It wasn't deliberate, just one of those fleeting instances that occur when you're near someone special. Yet, as I gazed at her, I noticed that familiar gentleness reflected in her eyes. A moment of quiet lingered between us. I couldn't tell if it was just my imagination or if there was a noticeable change in her behavior. "Is everything all right?" I inquired, attempting to ease the palpable tension that had accumulated. She blinked, as if emerging from a reverie, and offered a smile once more, this time with a touch more sincerity. "Indeed, all is well," she remarked, straightening her posture and retreating toward the kitchen sink, evidently attempting to dispel the lingering moment that had just occurred. "Jake has been feeling quite overwhelmed with his job recently. I've been making an effort to assist him, but you understand the situation." I nodded, attempting to dismiss the persistent sensation that something was still amiss in the atmosphere. Monica faced the sink and started to wash a dish, her movements appearing slower than normal, more intentional. It seemed as though she was deliberately steering clear of making eye contact with me, yet I sensed her gaze subtly resting in my vicinity. The atmosphere shifted as Jake descended the stairs, his boisterous, relaxed voice echoing through the space as he offered his greeting. "Hello, how are you doing?" Prepared to dive into the literature. I gave him a smile, grateful for the diversion. "Absolutely, let's make this happen." The remainder of the evening returned to its usual rhythm. Jake and I tackled his homework while Monica stepped away, allowing us to focus, yet I couldn't ignore the sense that something had shifted in our dynamic. It was understated, akin to a change in the atmosphere that eludes precise description, yet you sense its presence. As I departed that evening, Monica was nestled on the couch, engrossed in a book. She glanced up as I reached for my bag, offering me another smile. The same one from earlier, yet it now carried a bit more weight. Uncertainty clouded my thoughts. Was I merely conjuring illusions? Or had she begun to perceive me in a new light? Regardless of the circumstances, I was certain of one thing. The dynamics between us had become more complex than they once were. The following weeks passed, yet that feeling lingered stubbornly in my mind. Monica's demeanor remained understated, yet the changes were increasingly difficult to overlook. Each time I encountered her, an unspoken tension lingered in the atmosphere, a shift that had not existed previously. Though she didn't come across as overtly flirtatious, her attention seemed to be more directed at me than at Jake or anyone else. As I conversed with her, I couldn't help but notice the way her gaze lingered on me, as if she were examining me closely, discovering something unfamiliar that had previously escaped her attention. She wasn't crossing any boundaries, at least not at this point. The essence lay in the minutiae. Her inquiry about my day was accompanied by a pause, a moment that stretched just a bit too long as she passed me the drink. The gentle cadence of her voice wrapped around my name, creating an atmosphere that felt intimate and warm. It was unlike anything else, and despite my desire to dismiss it, an unsettling feeling lingered within me. One evening, Jake asked me to come over so we could collaborate on a group project. We sat in his room, reviewing notes and ideas, yet I could sense Monica's presence in the house, despite her absence from our space. Occasionally, I would spot her in the hallway or the kitchen, engaged in some task around the house. Our eyes would meet for a fleeting moment before she swiftly averted her gaze. It felt like she was attempting to steal furtive looks at me whenever she believed I was unaware. At one moment, Jake rose to fetch some snacks from the kitchen, leaving me alone, gazing at my laptop screen. I sensed a tug-of-war within me, as if two opposing forces were vying for my attention. I attempted to concentrate on the project, yet my thoughts continually wandered back to Monica and her recent behavior. It resonated like a subtle vibration, a constant presence in the backdrop of my every action. I understood the necessity of confronting the issue, yet I felt uncertain about the approach to take. What can I express? "Hey, I feel like your behavior towards me has changed." It felt absurd, yet the longer I contemplated it, the more the quietness enveloping us appeared to be thick with unexpressed emotion. Just as I was ready to begin jotting down some notes, Monica suddenly appeared at the door. I glanced upward, taken aback by her presence, her face a mask of mystery. Her expression was one I couldn't fully decipher. It was neither a smile nor a frown. She simply existed in that moment. "Hey, it seems like Jake is taking his time." She spoke with a calmness that carried an unusual sense of intent. "Would you like some tea while you wait?" After a brief pause, I gave a nod of agreement. "Absolutely, that sounds delightful." She smiled, yet it lacked the warmth of her previous expressions. It felt inviting, almost tender, as if she were making an effort to be kind. Monica made her way to the kitchen, and I trailed behind her. Upon entering the inviting, softly illuminated room, she retrieved 2 mugs and started to brew the tea. The routine unfolded as it always did, yet an unusual silence lingered between us this time. I surveyed the room, a sense of unease washing over me that I couldn't quite articulate. The house, once a haven of familiarity and comfort, now felt oddly quiet, almost too intimate. As she passed me the tea, our fingers lightly touched once more, and I felt an undeniable spark surge within me. I glanced down at the mug, attempting to conceal the sudden flutter in my chest. "Thank you," I whispered, gazing into the swirling steam of the cup. Monica took a seat opposite me, her gaze locked onto mine in a manner that stirred a sense of discomfort within me. She remained silent at first, simply sitting there, the stillness between us becoming denser with each passing moment. "I've been wanting to ask you something," she finally said, her voice soft yet unwavering. "How are you, truly? You've been rather silent as of late. I see that Jake has been involving you in various projects, but I sense there's something you're not sharing." I hesitated, uncertain of how to reply. Her tone carried an undertone that rendered her question more intimate than it ought to have been. "I'm all right," I finally replied, striving to maintain a calm tone. "I'm simply occupied with a multitude of things, I suppose." Monica appeared to harbor doubts. She inclined her head just a bit, a gentle crease forming on her lips as her gaze met mine. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here," she said, her voice soft and inviting. "You're aware of that, aren't you?" I nodded, sensing the gravity of her words envelop me. There was nothing explicitly suggestive, yet the warmth in her voice hinted at something deeper than a mere casual offer of assistance. It seemed as though she was extending her hand towards me in an unforeseen manner, evoking a sense of discomfort that was oddly not unpleasant. It was simply perplexing. Before I could utter another word, Jake came back with a bag of chips and a couple of sodas, his familiar upbeat spirit illuminating the space. As the moment faded, Monica rose to her feet, her familiar smile returning effortlessly. "All right, you two, let's refocus and dive back into your tasks. Try not to let him stay up too late." "Alex," she said, a playful lilt in her voice. I nodded, yet as I settled back into my chair at the desk, an unsettling sense of change lingered in the air. The hushed instances, the prolonged looks, the manner in which she addressed me. It began to seem as though I was evolving beyond merely being Jake's friend. I was uncertain of its meaning, yet I couldn't ignore the growing complexity of the situation. The atmosphere between Monica and me had grown more and more uncomfortable. The delicate nuances had lost their delicacy, and the strain between us had escalated to a critical juncture. I had been sidestepping it, acting as if everything was perfectly fine, but I could no longer maintain that facade. The circumstances were becoming increasingly intricate, and I realized I needed to confront it directly. Jake had once more extended an invitation for me to come over and collaborate on a project. The routine was growing increasingly familiar, yet this time, the ambience seemed altered. I stepped into the house, but rather than the familiar warm welcomes, an unusual stillness enveloped the space. Monica was absent, and for a fleeting moment, I questioned whether I had conjured it all in my mind. Perhaps she was simply being herself all along. Jake sat at the kitchen table, immersed in his work, headphones on, fingers dancing across the keyboard of his laptop. He appeared quite absorbed, lost in his tasks as he often is. I placed my bag on the ground, approached him, and gently tapped his shoulder to draw his attention. "Hey there, how are you doing?" Jake glanced upward, momentarily taken aback, but then a smile spread across his face. "Absolutely, just working my way through this task. It's chaotic, yet I'm making progress." I nodded, yet my mind wandered repeatedly to Monica. It left me pondering her whereabouts and the reasons for her absence. I couldn't possibly mention it to Jake, yet my curiosity gnawed at me relentlessly. After roughly an hour, Jake paused to fetch some snacks, leaving me solitary in the kitchen. As I settled into my seat, I found myself uncertain of what to anticipate when suddenly Monica walked in. She appeared serene, perhaps excessively so. The tempest seemed to have subsided, yet an unsettling feeling lingered within me. She remained silent at first. Instead, she rested against the kitchen counter, gazing at me with an expression that felt both known and disconcerting. Her expression lacked a smile, yet her eyes held a gentle warmth. For the first time, I observed the significant change in her appearance, as she appeared much older. Not in a negative sense, but rather in a more sophisticated, insightful manner. Her demeanor exuded a depth of experience that suggested she had faced challenges far beyond my comprehension. "Alex." She started, her voice firm, nearly deliberate. "It's time for a conversation." My heart began to race. A wave of unease washed over me, and I immediately wished I had spoken up earlier. I had a clear sense of the direction this was heading, yet I found myself uncertain about my readiness to confront it. The mounting tension between us was on the verge of reaching its peak, leaving me uncertain about the potential fallout. "I'm aware that our relationship has changed," she said, her voice steady. "And I see clearly. I've observed it, and I believe you have as well. I simply want to ensure that everything is clear, all right?" Her words struck me with the force of a gut-wrenching blow. It wasn't merely that she was recognizing the discomfort. It was the realization that she was bravely stepping forward to face it. I was at a loss for how to respond. Is it wise to consent? Should I refuse it? Should I simply allow her to speak? "I'm not quite sure what you're referring to," I replied, making an effort to maintain a calm tone. I aimed to be considerate, yet I found it unavoidable. A part of me remained reluctant to confront the reality of the situation unfolding before me. Monica exhaled deeply, moving in my direction. "Come on, Alex," she murmured gently. "There's no need for pretense. I have observed it for some time now. Since that night, you know, the one where we had that conversation. I don't want to create any awkwardness, but I can no longer overlook it." My heartbeat raced. That evening, the evening she had mentioned that I reminded her of her former partner. That night marked the beginning of it all. A whirlwind of events unfolded in just a few weeks, leaving me feeling ensnared in the chaos of it all. Monica stepped back and folded her arms across her chest. "I understand that your feelings are complex, and I respect that. However, I must also acknowledge my own emotions in this situation. I've given this a great deal of thought. Much more than I likely ought to have. I've been sensing that there's a connection between us. Something that transcends the informal bond we've shared as friends." Her words lingered, leaving my mind in a haze. I felt the urge to express myself, to utter some words, yet my thoughts were a complete void. I never envisioned that I would end up in this predicament. Particularly with her. The mother of my closest companion. It was incorrect. The age difference was insignificant. The very idea of stepping over that boundary sent a wave of unease through me. "Monica," I faltered, struggling to articulate my thoughts. I found myself torn between the clarity of what I believed to be right and the irresistible allure of the unfolding events. I never intended to cause her pain, yet I couldn't ignore the fact that everything was unraveling. She appeared to pick up on my uncertainty. "She understood," she said. Her voice carried a hint of regret. "This feels overwhelming, and I regret mentioning it. I simply had to express it verbally." The stillness enveloped us, thick and uneasy. Her gaze was palpable, an unspoken demand for my words, yet I found myself frozen, ensnared in the intensity of the moment. My heart pounded in my chest, thoughts whirled chaotically, and I felt utterly lost in finding a way out of this predicament. At last, I found the words to express myself. "Monica, I find myself at a loss for words. It was never my intention for things to unfold this way. I don't want to create any awkwardness, but I'm also uncertain about what this situation is." She nodded slowly, her expression becoming more gentle. "I get it, no worries. I simply had to express the truth. I have no expectations, yet I can no longer maintain the facade that everything is as it should be." Apologies escaped my lips as I sensed the gravity of the moment enveloping me. Monica offered me a delicate, bittersweet smile. "There's no reason to say sorry. This is quite intricate. I nodded, thoughts swirling in my head. I was completely at a loss for a solution, yet there was one certainty that stood out to me. Everything had shifted between us, and I found myself uncertain if I could ever return to how it once was. Days had slipped by as I pondered all that had transpired. The dialogues with Monica, those instances when the tension hung heavily in the air, the bewilderment, the remorse. The burden was heavy upon my shoulders. Regardless of my attempts to make sense of it, there was one undeniable truth I held on to. I had to bring this to a close. The circumstances surrounding Monica were far more intricate than I was equipped to manage. It transcended merely her words or actions. It revolved around the reality that we had both transgressed a boundary, and that boundary was indelible. A few days had passed since we last spoke, and the atmosphere seemed heavy with things left unsaid. Since that night, Monica had been silent, and I found myself caught between relief and fear. I realized it was essential to have a conversation with Jake. He was my closest companion. He had a right to understand the situation, even if it caused him pain. I reached out to him that afternoon. I had intended to meet up later, but the anticipation became too much to bear. I had to express this feeling I've been holding inside. "Greetings, Jake." I mentioned it when he answered the call. My voice constricted, as if I were struggling to push the words out. "Hello, how are you doing today? May we have a conversation? Face to face. I have something to share with you." The silence stretched on, an endless moment hanging in the air. "Absolutely, of course. Are you okay?" "Sure, just rendezvous with me at our regular location. I'll go over all the details when you arrive." I ended the call, inhaled deeply, and reached for my jacket. I sensed that this dialogue would alter the course of everything. I felt uncertain about Jake's reaction, yet honesty was essential in this moment. There simply was no alternative. As Jake arrived, I found myself already settled on the bench by the park. He approached, his typical relaxed smile giving way to an expression of worry. "Okay, my friend. What's happening?" I took a deep breath, the gravity of my impending words crashing down on me in a single moment. "Jake, I have something difficult to express, but it's important for you to hear the truth. Concerning your mother." His eyes squinted in bewilderment. "What about my mother?" I paused, the phrases tangled in my throat. I never envisioned finding myself in this situation. Monica has been behaving in a way that's quite different towards me. I believe I've been behaving differently around her as well. Jake's expression stiffened, his bewilderment shifting to distrust. "What do you mean in another way? What's happening?" I inhaled deeply and allowed the truth to flow freely. She mentioned that I brought to mind her former partner. Honestly, there were times when it seemed like there was something special between us. Jake fixed his gaze on me, his face a mask of mystery. For an instant, everything in my surroundings seemed to stand still. It was hard to discern whether he felt anger or pain, yet I could observe the thoughts churning within him. At last, after what seemed like an endless stretch of silence, he uttered a word. "Are you saying that my mom has been flirting with you?" His voice was soft, tinged with skepticism. I nodded slowly, my gaze drifting away from his piercing stare. Indeed, that was not my intention. I never envisioned any of it. Yet, I found it impossible to overlook. It was far more significant than that. It was genuine. Jake stepped back, raking his fingers through his hair. "What on earth, my friend? This situation is quite troubling." "I understand." I spoke, my voice trembling. "I understand. My intentions were never to cause you pain." Yet, I found myself at a loss for what steps to take next. I believed I had the power to manage it, yet here I am, unable to do so. Jake fell silent, his gaze fixed on the earth beneath him. Then he glanced upward, his eyes brimming with a blend of exasperation and pain. "What comes next? What is going on between you and my mother?" "I have already had a conversation with her." I spoke, sensing the gravity of the moment enveloping me. I expressed to her that it was impossible. This path is no longer sustainable for us. It's overly chaotic, excessively intricate. I really value our friendship and hope we can work through this together. Jake's expression eased slightly, yet the sorrow in his eyes remained palpable. I understand, my friend. This situation is quite troubling. She is my mother. What could have prompted her to act this way? I'm uncertain. I replied, shaking my head. It seemed she was in a state of confusion. Perhaps she felt isolated or simply. I'm uncertain. However, I did not promote it. I never intended to cause you pain, Jake. You are my closest companion. Jake nodded, yet his face remained shrouded in uncertainty. I understand. I'm at a loss for how to process everything that's happening. We lingered in quietude for several moments, each of us absorbing the gravity of the words that had just been exchanged. It transcended the events that unfolded between Monica and me. It revolved around the shattered trust, the lines that had been overstepped, and the repercussions that ensued. I hope this doesn't create any distance between us, my friend. I spoke at last, my tone soft yet resolute. Our friendship means a great deal to me. Jake held my gaze for what felt like an eternity, his expression intense. I'm uncertain if things will remain unchanged, but I certainly don't want to lose you, Alex. Please allow me some time to reflect on everything. I comprehend. I spoke, a blend of relief and melancholy washing over me. I was uncertain about the future of our friendship, but I felt a sense of relief in having shared my truth with him. The remainder of the afternoon unfolded in an unusual hush, with neither of us quite sure how to proceed. Yet, there was one certainty I held close. The choice had been finalized. It had come to an end between Monica and me. What had begun between us was over. Though it may require patience for the situation between Jake and me to find resolution, I held on to the hope that eventually, we would discover a path forward. A few months had passed since that conversation with Jake, and so much had shifted. The echoes of everything that had transpired, the strain between me and Monica, the clash with Jake, the unease and discomfort we all experienced, lingered on, yet it had softened with the passage of time. In a sense, it feels like we were all beginning to mend, gradually yet undeniably. Jake and I decided to pause and reflect on everything. The initial weeks following my revelation were challenging. There was a significant distance between us, not stemming from anger, but rather due to the overwhelming amount we needed to sort through. He was completely justified in his feelings, and it was important for me to honor his need for space and time. Our time together had changed. We no longer spent time as we once did, yet our conversations remained sporadic. It was clear he was making an effort to move on from the past. We were both navigating the path to restore our friendship after everything had been unsettled. Monica honored my wishes with respect. She maintained her distance, and while I understood she was still sorting through her own emotions, we had come to a mutual decision that it was wiser to remain amicable and move on from what had been. It felt a bit uncomfortable, yet I appreciated her restraint in not escalating the situation. It was already a challenge to prevent matters from spiraling out of control. The final thing I required was for her to persist in advocating for something that felt fundamentally wrong. As time went on, the burden of it all started to diminish. Jake and I began to spend more time together again, and although things weren't quite as they used to be, they were gradually improving. It was evident that he had let go of any resentment towards me. The connection we had was resilient enough to endure this challenge, yet I understood that it would require time for everything to return to a genuine sense of normalcy. One evening, Jake welcomed me to his home for a relaxed get-together. It was the first occasion we had engaged in something of that nature in what seemed like an eternity. As I entered, the sound of Monica's voice drifted from the kitchen, causing my heart to quicken for just a moment. The tension between us, while significantly reduced, still hung in the air, though it lacked the intensity it once had. Jake welcomed me with his familiar, laid-back grin, yet this time, there was an unmistakable change in his demeanor. Perhaps it was the manner in which he carried himself or the way his eyes glimmered with an air of tranquility. Something had shifted, and I could sense it clearly. He had let go of the burdens of the past, and I had too. "Hey there," Jake said, casually tossing me a beer. "How have you been doing?" This time, my smile was sincere. "Quite satisfactory, indeed." "Improved." "Indeed, I feel the same way," he responded. "I've been reflecting on all that transpired, and I'm uncertain. It was chaotic, yet I understand. I understand that your intentions weren't to cause me pain. After reflecting on everything, I've decided to let go of any lingering resentment." A moment of silence enveloped me, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for his words. "I never intended to cause you pain, Jake. I made a mistake, and I sincerely apologize for it." Jake nodded, a gentle warmth spreading across his face. "It belongs to yesterday. It seems we've both progressed beyond this point. I'm really happy that our friendship has endured." There it stood. A genuine burden had been removed. It may not have been an ideal solution, yet it was the most we could achieve. A sense of relief washed over me. I understood the importance of continuous improvement and honoring our limits, yet in that instant, I felt assured that we were in a good place. Later, as Monica entered the living room, the tension lingered, yet it felt distinct this time. Her gaze lacked the confusion or longing it once held for me. She offered a polite smile, and I reciprocated, yet an undercurrent of unease lingered between us. Yet, it was within reach. "Hey, Alex," she said, her voice composed and unwavering. "How have you been faring?" "Excellent," I stated, maintaining a neutral yet courteous tone. "I appreciate your inquiry." The conversation may have been brief, yet it carried a weight that felt important. For the first time, it seemed we were both recognizing that what had transpired was in the past. No emotions remained, nor were there any feelings left unexpressed. Two individuals, once entangled in an uncomfortable moment, are now charting their own paths apart. That evening, as I sat with Jake, we engaged in a lively conversation about various topics, sports, cherished memories, and everything else that came to mind. The dialogue unfolded effortlessly, reminiscent of the past. Yet, there was one certainty I held close to my heart. We found ourselves in a more favorable situation than we had experienced previously. Time had performed its usual task. It had mended, or perhaps calmed, the harshness of the circumstance. Life may not have been flawless, but it was genuine, and that sufficed. Stepping out of Jake's house that night, a wave of tranquility washed over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in ages. I discovered much about my own nature, the significance of setting boundaries, and the value of being truthful. The last few months have served as a revelation, and I found myself thankful for the insight they provided.